It's an exciting day for us here at the World Government Summit, talking about AI, talking about our future, something that everyone here, no doubt, is incredibly invested in. Lila, I guess the first question for you is, how worried should we really be?
I think this is a very important time in AI's development. We're actually still in the early stages, which means that we're never going to have as much time as we have now to experiment. We're never going to have as much time as now to shape how the technology gets developed, how it gets deployed. And so I actually think, part of my job is both to worry, but also to make sure that we're investing in the opportunity. I think, as mentioned before, AI has the potential to help us solve some of humanity's biggest challenges, but that really requires us being engaged.
How do you feel about the current ecosystem? Because there are a lot of fears, certainly in the media, but I think there are fears that all of us share in terms of the job loss potential. In your mind, are the governments prepared?
Well, I think we've seen in the past how technology has really shifted. I've been in the technology industry for over 30 years, and just seeing, I remember the days even back in computing and internet, when that was on the rise, there was a shift in the job sector. And I think we can take a lot to learn from the past, but also I think AI has a potential. It's already getting more general and more capable. And so I think now is the right time for us to be working more closely with governments. So one thing we are seeing is here in the UAE, where I work in the UK, governments are really starting to lean in to say, how do we use AI as a way to help address some of the bottlenecks, whether it's planning, public planning, and trying to streamline the process. I was just in Northern Ireland where teachers have been experimenting with Gemini, and they've actually saved 10 hours per week per teacher and able to serve students with different learning needs. So I think we're already seeing where this is making progress. Now, AI is such a transformational technology, it will require exceptional care. And that means we have to regulate, but we have to regulate well. We have to be able to manage and mitigate the risk, which requires foresight. And we also have to make sure that we're supporting the innovation for entrepreneurs to be able to innovate, for us to use AI in healthcare to get better healthcare, deliver better services. So I think it's this, how do we manage it and collaborate in the right way?
For those leaving university right now, there are a lot of fears that already perhaps their degrees are obsolete. In your mind, what do education as an industry need to do to step up?
Yeah, this is actually an area I'm particularly passionate about. Listen, AI is not going away. And the more we just try to layer AI on top of existing infrastructure, we're going to start seeing the challenges and the bottlenecks. And one area I'm actually particularly concerned is if we're not supporting responsible usage and teaching that at a young age, both with professors or teachers and students, then how do we expect them to have a role in shaping the technology?
And when you say responsible usage, is that just asking silly questions and wasting the energy?
No, I'll give you an example. I was talking to a teacher the other day, and they're putting together an AI student council for their school, such that one teacher says you can use AI this way, another teacher says don't use AI. And what's happening is the kids are using AI. The teachers just they can say whatever they want. So instead, what they're trying to do is flip it and say, let's get the students working with the teachers to put together a framework where we agree on within a school, so at least there's some general guidelines. It's kind of like in your office environment, too. You really want to set the ground rules, because if you don't, you have inequitable use, and you start to actually accelerate a gap, rather than thinking about how are you responsibly going to do this, and learn from it so that you can change the guardrails, you can inform what's needed from a safety or risk perspective, and also highlight where things are working to accelerate.
So just a few weeks ago, Jamie Dimon suggested at Davos that governments are going to have to create incentives for financial institutions and corporates to keep people from being shed at an alarming rate as AI becomes more and more a part of business. In your mind, what do governments need to do now to prepare for this?
Well, I think the first thing is how are you using AI? So the first step is for governments to actually, individuals to start using it. Now, sometimes that might be in your work, but it's also in your personal life. AI is a general use technology. And our belief is that it actually should enhance human capability, not replace it. And so I think the first thing is experiment with the tools. Again, you're never going to have as much time as you have now to come up to speed. And the other thing is there are a lot of really interesting use cases around the world, and I've been particularly impressed with some of the conversations we've had here in the UAE about really leaning into it. I mean, look, it's the first government with an AI minister, first country that has an AI university. There's some really interesting applications. The entrepreneurs are coming up with, you lowered the barrier. You no longer need to code at the same level. So you can start ideating before you build a company, removing some of the barriers that existed before. I think healthcare, understanding diseases, addressing it. I think what's exciting about this is we're seeing the usage and the impact. And so it's more of a matter of how do we bring that to fruition and support the growth.
Tell me this, we've all heard the stories of AI bots, essentially, or AI getting ahead of itself and speaking. These AI agents are speaking to each other now. They don't need the humans. They're talking about the humans. And they don't necessarily have great things to say about us. In your mind, is this something, this used to be science fiction, and now it's actually happening today. Are AI companies ahead of this?
Well, so maybe first a quick background. DeepMind was founded in 2010, so well before, we're seeing a lot as the within the world as one of the leading labs to bring about the modern era of AI. And I have to say that even from the beginning, the founders started this with a concept of we have to build responsibility in from the beginning. And what that means is research. So we've done a lot of work around ethics research. Before we did our work on agentic technology and published a paper or did a technology demonstration, we actually did a lot of research around the ethics of advanced AI assistants. We didn't have a vocabulary to talk about the risks or the benefits, so we do a lot of that investment up front because responsibility or safety checks shouldn't be a bolt-on. Cybersecurity shouldn't be a bolt-on. You shouldn't wait till the end. For research to really flourish, it needs to happen from the beginning and in hand. So what we're seeing is by building an interdisciplinary team, by facilitating as leaders, I think it's our job to facilitate the conversation so that we can identify that and do some of the mitigations up front.
Does it worry you specifically?
I lose sleep because I'm both worried and excited. I have teenage daughters, and my feeling is that what we're doing right now as leaders in the world, it is setting the stage for how AI is going to get developed and how it's going to get deployed. It's never been more important for us to figure out how do we get ready for this technology. It's only going to get more capable and more general, and that means if we want AI to be developed for and with society, we need to make sure that the voices are heard, that people are engaged, and that they have the literacy and access to use the technology, because we can shape the future. Humans are in charge. Agentic work should be about a human retaining control. But that's only going to happen if we have accountability in the system, and that's just going to take more of us participating in this AI era.
How worrying is the idea that in terms of more of us participating and creating that framework, we'll be lost in the race between the United States and China?
I really struggle sometimes with this race conversation because to me, the race should be about what are the problems we're trying to solve? And we should be focused on that. So maybe I can give you a quick example. We have a technology called AlphaFold. I know a lot of the conversations in the previous sessions were both about science and about AI tools for productivity. One of the technologies we came up with is called AlphaFold, which is an advanced AI system that predicts the 3D structure of a protein. That's important because it's the basic building block of life. And you can understand diseases better, come up with therapeutics, why some crops are more resistant to disease than others. There are 3 million research. So this was something that we did. We were awarded the first Nobel Prize for the application of AI. This is about 1 billion years of research, which we have put into a database and made freely available to researchers worldwide. 3 million researchers in the world using this. There are 3,000 researchers in the UAE using this. Over 100 research papers have been published. So I think that just shows that if you put this in the hands of people to excel, we're seeing impact at a local level. And I think that's what's really important. We have 16 dialects in Gemini of Arabic. So I think this is really about how do we make it sure that the local teams, that last mile, has control over how AI gets used.
So China-US race is not something that concerns you, or?
I'm focused on what we can control, which is about how are we supporting local ecosystems to make sure that this gets developed and deployed in the right way.
And as governments, what is the greatest enabler for what it is you do?
I think for governments right now, I think some people mentioned it earlier, some of my colleagues, which is how are you having the right conversations? Like, again, now is the time to say, where do you want to experiment? How do you ring fence that such that you can learn and improve it so that you can scale? I do think education and healthcare are two of the main areas to do this. They are high risk, which is, again, part of the reason why we need to be investing in this space from now.
DeepMind is a great success story for the United Kingdom, one of very few in this space, perhaps the only one, depending on who you talk to. In your mind, what here in the UAE can this country do to be an incubator for the next DeepMind?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of that, which is, I think the entrepreneurial spirit is very strong here. I've been really impressed. The leaning into the opportunity to use AI. I mean, look, we're from all over the world, and we're here talking about this. And that's, I think dialogue is an important first aspect. Seen a very kind of pro-innovation approach while also still managing the risk, and I think that is really critical. So I think it's just keep doing it. And when I look back to what made DeepMind successful, I mean, I've spent the majority of my career in Silicon Valley, as an engineer by background. As an Arab, of course, I had a choice, which was to become an engineer. And I think that sometimes doing the technology out of Silicon Valley is actually more impactful. What I have seen by being based in London and working on this is that we take much more of a global perspective, right? We're not caught up with technology for technology's sake, but we're thinking about how do we close the gap from developing the technology to having the real world impact. And I think that's something that here in the UAE and in the Middle East that we can really do, which is there's no shortage of challenges that we have. We know what the challenges are, but how can we use this tool to really unlock the human potential to advance some of these works and do it in a way that's very culturally relevant, but also able to move fast while the rest of the world works through the challenges.
And just as a final question, obviously, we talk so often about how fast forward it is in this country when we talk to putting women in positions of power, half of the government made up of women, implementing this idea of putting women on corporate boards and the private sector. In your mind, in terms of that penetration in the AI space, we're still at a very low base. What's going to change that?
Oh, I wish I knew. I think it is going to take more women on stage. It's going to take more women in the audience in those roles that you mentioned, because I think, sometimes I forget, right? I've had to be told, certainly within my career, of like, Lila, you're actually in this leadership role, and just being able to have someone who I can see, another woman who's made it through. And I think those role models and just being present, having a seat at the table, recreating the table so there is space, is actually one of the best things leaders can do. And it's really exciting to actually see that type of commitment and delivery. It's something that I felt has been missing most of my career.
Yeah. Lila, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.